Hello, hello to the True Blue crew. Welcome in for this almost the end of the year 2025. We've got some big events coming up the next 2 weeks with Christmas Day. We're in the middle of Hanukkah, so happy Hanukkah to those who celebrate, and just lots of fun stuff coming up here at the end of the year. And if you have been following the channel, then you know that I am working on a sampler quilt using my little bit different size of quilt blocks. These are 6 by 9 inch finished quilt blocks. And the thumbnail of the video, the intro slide, showed the whole sampler, and we are working on the ornament tonight. And my sample is hanging here off to the side, and it's just going to be a mess to get down. So second thing, kind of apology right off the bat, is that I don't have the pattern ready for download yet. So I will work on that tonight, make sure it gets uploaded ASAP, and I'll put a notice on my Facebook or on my YouTube page home screen as well. But ornaments are round, correct? So that means we are going to be sewing curves. And I simply took the paper pattern, the paper template that I printed out, and I taped it to some cardboard. So now I have this long-lasting template to cut out my curved pieces. And when you are piecing curves, everybody gets worried because these two pieces don't fit, but that's because of seam allowance. So don't worry, cut out your pieces. So you need your ornament fabric and your background fabric to make the curves. And so I'm going to do the curved units first. And of course, I'm doing the quarter square circle. So just one quadrant. So I need 4 of these. If you have followed other tutorials and you know how to do a circle and sew that circle, you could do an inset circle. You could also applique a circle ornament onto your background fabric. So lots and lots of options, but I like sewing curves generally. So the other fun thing I did was I chose some striped fabric for my ornament tonight. So we will play with that. I'm just going to iron, give these a major, stack iron, not an individual press at this point. And that should be good enough for this beginning stage. So the first thing we want to do is fold our fabrics to crease and find the center. So I am just lining up those end pieces of my curve, and I am going to finger press a crease right there. And then I want to fold the wrong sides together on my wedge, the circle portion, so that when I lay those down, they nest beautifully. And I'm going to put a pin right in that crease line. And then I take these 2 pieces and I rotate the edges so they line up. And then I grab another pin and I am pinning off to the side so that I can sew along this edge. And you can see that it's kind of ruffly there. That's okay. We're going to ease that all in as we sew. And then I do the same thing on the other end. I'm going to rotate that top piece so that it lies flat against and is lined up with just that tiny edge of my circle fabric. And I will pin that in place. Okay. So this is all I do to get my fabrics ready. I crease the centers and I put in 3 pins. Everything else is going to be adjustments as I am sewing. Now, there are people that like to glue baste that edge. There are people that use more pins. I have just found that I'm not worried about perfection. I would much rather get this thing done and it, kind of hold your breath and sew fast and it doesn't hurt for very long. And that way I can get my pieces generally to lay flat without too many puckers. So let's find all our pins. And of course, making small blocks, that just adds a level of difficulty. But you know what? If you can sew the small pieces, then the bigger ones are no problem either. So give it a try. As I said, I'll have a template for you. I don't know the exact size of this circle off the top of my head. I just made it fit in my block. I'm fussing with this. Small edge of fabric. Hello, Lori. Yeah, I don't do circles all that often. Lori's saying she has trouble with them. But obviously you get better the more you do. So I give myself grace. They don't have to be perfect. Go slow and just ease your fabric around that curve. And you should be okay. Sometimes it helps to stick your tongue out the corner of your mouth. That's a joke. But you start concentrating and you never know what funny expressions you're making. There's one. There, a long while ago, at least 10 years ago, I'm thinking, there was a trend for, what was it, the 7-minute circle, 5 minutes, 6-minute, I don't know, something about the inset circle. So you could cut and sew the 2 pieces together and it would piece the circle inside the other fabric. But I need to practice these because I'm giving a lesson to my guild about sewing curves. The trickiest part is lining up the corner at the beginning and the end. Okay. So there's one. There it is. Last edge. Okay. Lori asks, is there a certain foot that would help, meaning the presser foot on your machine? Yes, I know Bernina makes some kind of circle foot or attachment. I just use my regular presser feet. I am so basic, not fancy at all. So you'd have to do some more research on that. Okay, I'm getting all lined up here to start, and I'm just using a normal, as I said, a normal presser foot, a normal stitch length, a normal seam allowance, and we will hold our breath and see how it goes. Okay, so I need to get started first so that I can take those pins out. Okay, so I've got my first few stitches. I've taken that first seam out. Okay, motion warning on the workspace. I want to angle that a little more so you might be able to see what I'm doing. I've got a video for improv curves that's a little better. I am tugging on the edge of the fabric to make sure that it is flat and straight against the bottom layer. So there's puckers in the top layer away from the edge. It gets, wavy, but right up against the edge of my fabric, it's laying flat. So we will keep that going and slowly turn our fabric. And now I'm past the halfway point. So I'm trying to get this all kind of laying flat on that edge. And then right off the edge. And one of those things, you have to do two so you can take the first one out and see how you did. But I've got other pieces of the block. So let me cheat a little bit and do one of those seams, and then we'll look at the first one. Okay, so like I said, it looks all wavy and bumpy and wonky, but when I smooth that out, and I've got my iron there, I'm going to press to the outside fabric, and it's good enough. A little bit wobbly. And I was just seeing, someone will try it on this one edge, wants to curl up and go not quite straight. You can see it curved a little bit. I stretched that fabric. But you can press and then trim that to size. And I'm trying to show you there's no real puckers along that seam. So that works for me for my first unit. You can't really see against the dark background. It's not, I can press it into submission a little more. And I was watching someone online, their little short video. They actually pressed towards the circle. And so right now there's a little bit of lip of fabric when I press towards the background. If I press towards the circle, it's like the circle is on top then instead of recessed down a little bit, if that makes sense. So some people think that will lay a little bit nicer. Hello, Zaza. Good to see you. Okay, let me try the other three quadrants here. So like I said, just the first few stitches and then that first pin comes out. I am holding the edge of the background, the top fabric, up almost perpendicular to the bottom fabric so that it can just kind of go where it needs to go. I'm trying to be a little more gentle so I don't distort in there. And I'm getting a pucker, so I'm going to lift my presser foot and make sure everything's flat, and then just kind of rotate around to my pin in the middle. And then I can take that pin out and raise my presser foot so I can get the fabrics to line up and probably took that pin out too soon because this one is going a little wonky, but I'm gonna let it be just for the sake of getting this done today. Pins are tricky. Pins are tricky sometimes. So yes, this is definitely one where it's like the first half of the circle always goes much easier than the second half, but practice, practice, practice. And it's just fabric. It only has to be straight. You only have to get things matched up for a few stitches at a time. Okay, so you can see on this one how I didn't have them exactly lined up there, but we're going to see how it goes. And I'm going to turn it around and try the pressing towards the circle trick on this one. Does it want to go that way? Press it from the back first, and then we can compare. I'm still pulling on the fabric. I've got a tiny little pucker on that one. Whoops, wasn't holding it up. You can kind of see the shadow there, that curve. But it's laying nice and flat there. I don't know if that will show the difference between the two. Not really. Okay, one more, and then we can put the sections together. So again, you only have to worry about lining up about 1/2 inch of fabric at a time, and then you can, just let the rest of the fabric kind of go where it wants to, where it needs to. And I always recommend finding someone who's proficient and take a lesson with them. This one just really doesn't want to go. That I may have to do over, because it's like the top fabric was way too loose. It was like the bottom, you could tell the bottom fabric was you were gonna need to stretch it so much. I'm going to be working on the Starry Night pattern from So Kind of Wonderful in 2026, which also has curved pieces. So we will have plenty of time to practice. So grab the quick curve ruler and the Starry Night pattern, and we can sew together. Let's see how this third one did. Again, I'm pressing towards the circle. So I like the look of that. Seems to lay flatter and behave better. So there is the third quadrant. Hello, Tasha. Hello, Zaza. I was just reading, Tasha was describing watching Zaza's video this morning with her kids. It is nice to have those British, Scottish accents, isn't it? I don't want to offend Zaza, but I know that's a sore point for Scotsmen and women. And I really enjoyed my Scottish heritage as a kid on St. Patrick's Day and wearing orange instead of the traditional green. Okay, I'm starting over on this last patch because I didn't have things lined up very well. So we will try this again. Okay, and then I will follow my own advice. I'm holding the center pin with my right hand, and I am keeping the fabrics, the top fabric lifted up a little bit. Slowing down. And then I get bored with being precise and I speed up and it doesn't. It's like there's so much bottom fabric left. Get around this. Yep, I gave up. Okay, these other little pieces that I'm sewing are going to be the topper of the ornament, you know, the little metal piece at the top. Okay, not too bad. It wants to lay flat. So we will give it a good press on both sides. Gonna trim off some of my excess thread. And there we go. Okay. I have 4 quadrants. And why did that get screwed up again? I thought I had this laid out, but there's no way to rotate these. Okay. Striped fabric. I thought I had it worked out so that I could put opposite pieces across from each other. And I should be able to, because I've got two that go horizontal, and I've got 2 that go vertical. And then when I rotate them, okay, now they're all horizontal. Why was I having such a problem with that? Okay, so directional fabric, striped fabric can make things kind of complicated. Okay, and I am going to start from the center of the circle and sew out so that I don't have to really worry about those seams. I can keep them together with my fingers and not have to pin. It's like they want at that short edge, they want to flip over and go towards the background instead of the circle. So that almost makes them nest. Okay, let's see how I did lining up. Ooh, nice. Lining up my circle there. And Tasha says she's never used directional fabric like my stripes. I'm being brave. You know, ornaments come in so many different kind of sparkly variations. I thought that the stripes would give that effect. Now I need and I pressed that seam open just for some reduced bulk. You could figure out which way you want to sew opposite or to press opposite seams and nest your circle. That one was not quite as good there at the top of that circle. But things like that will quilt out. If you know somebody that would, take a close look at your finished quilt and judge you for those mismatched bits, then you don't need to make a quilt for that person. Okay, and here I do want to, just for fun, I'm going to put a pin in that seam to keep these outer edges. There is my stripy circle ornament. Let me see if I can press that flat. If you're watching on the workspace, it keeps popping up. So it's not laying quite flat at the moment. But press it into submission. It's just fabric, right? Okay, so as I said, I have a, let me press these to the outside where it's darker. I have a little topper row to make the top piece of my ornament. And that, I was trying to fussy cut that fabric so that the lines would be in the center, and that was a total fail. But this and that, how in the world did that piece not? Okay, look how much bigger my piece is. And I don't, well, yeah, I guess. So I should cut my, okay. So if I want to trim my circle down so that it matches this, maybe I could stretch that to, I wrote down the measurements months ago for this, and then I don't do a lot of trimming in between, but that I stretched this fabric, or something, because that is, maybe I just cut that one corner of the background too big for the circle. Because you can see we've got a big gap there on our ornament that we need to make this whole block the same width. So, whoops, and I didn't, okay, hang on. And then there's a gap there. I don't want that gap, so let me rip again to get this all together. So good thing I haven't written the pattern yet, because I'm going to say trim the ornament so that you have a 1/4 inch seam above the circle, because I have more than a 1/4 inch, and so that left a gap when I tried to piece it to the rest of the block. That's what I get for rushing ahead. Okay, excuse me while I get my cutting mat. Motion warning. Okay, so we can put our 1/4 inch right above. So I've got a 1/4 inch on my circle on the right and a 1/4 inch on the circle on the top, and I can trim that. Just some little bits left there, and then rotate it 90 degrees and do the same thing. Keep a 1/4 inch on the right, a 1/4 inch on the top, and trim. And then we have a much nicer match to our ornament topper. Okay, motion. I know, Zaza, isn't that crazy how they all spun around? All the lines ended up going horizontal. I don't know how that ended up that way, but okay, so I need to measure my center again of my little ornament topper. Put that right on my seam. And Okay, that's better. There's still a tiny little gap, but obviously from far away, it looks like a ornament. And to finish this off, I've got a wide piece at the bottom that I'm going to add. And then or no, this goes on the top first. Okay. So I've got one piece of green that's the 6.5 inch width of my full block. I've got a 5.5 inch piece that's going to go on the top of my ornament right now when it doesn't have its side pieces on yet. Press that all towards the plain fabric. And then I'm going to put 2 thin pieces on either side. Oh yeah. My pieces are like 1/2 inch off. I don't know where I went wrong with all of this, but I'm going to have someone look over all my measurements before I put this pattern out on my website, because this is embarrassing to have everything measured wrong. And I don't want to be that pattern writer who people get the pattern and they're like, oh, nothing works. Nothing comes out right. But I mean, look at that. That's bad measuring. And that one. Unless my 1/4 inch seam is way off. That's another possibility. Okay, there is our ornament. And The last thing you would do is just hand stitch or, by machine, do the little, however you wanted to do. If you wanted to do a loop to show, to hang it on the tree, that might be fun. I can do that with some just straight line stitching here. Instead of hand embroidery. Just get it lined up. I want to go around again because I want this to stand out. In my first sample, I just used a single strand of thread, and you can't really see the hook, the ornament hook, to hang it on my first sample. But I just did a little bit of stitching there so that you can have your ornament. Okay. I need to double check the measurements, and then those instructions will be up on my website really, really soon for people that are collecting the Holidaze blocks. Oh, Lori says it makes us feel better when you professionals have to use the seam rippers. Yeah, seam ripping is a fact of life if you're going to sew. Just get used to that friend that you have there. So we don't even have a tree up. I think I mentioned that. So this is the only ornament that's going to be unpacked this year. We have a cat that we are afraid would destroy the tree. So we haven't been too motivated to put a tree up and decorate. But I think I need to go ahead and get some of the other decorations out, because my husband has been in a funk, and I think if I decorated just made the house a little more cheerful, then he'd be a little happier. And I want to show off again my Hemingway pouch that I made with the present block from the Holidaze Sampler. This is going in the mail tomorrow. I promise I will get to the post office tomorrow to mail this out to Sue, who was drawn as the winner of the Day 10 prize. So if you watch the Quiltmas videos, the 12 days of Quiltmas that were advertised on the channel last week, starting on the 1st of December, you saw 12 different projects and 12 different people won those items. So all sorts of quilting goodies are going in the mail to those winners. So congratulations to Sue and all the other folks. And thank you so much for watching our 12 Days of Christmas. That was a fun collaboration. And now, since I have a little more time to do some sewing, I thought I would catch up on my 3-yard quilt that I started a while ago. This is the Nebula pattern, and here is the first block. It is really fun to make these star point units with half square triangles and some squares. And then they've done this kind of funky layout with side strips of the red and the blue. I'm making mine patriotic so it can go to Quilts of Valor. And yeah, I'm having fun with that. So This was one combination of colors. I've got 3 different reds. You can see 2 of them there in that. One's more solid and then the stripy. I've got 2 different backgrounds, 3 different reds, 3 different blues. So I'm doing 3 different star variations, and because I want to make it 12 blocks. So here's the next combination. It's the same star fabrics, but I'm using different colors of red and blue in that block. So I had these ready, so I will sew another block together here while we're together. And the great thing is when you put these blocks together, there's no seams to match, so it's going to go really fast. Because if you're, how did I end up with 5 pieces? I don't know. So I've got my first block, and then I take my second block and I just turn it 90 degrees sideways, and look, this straight piece of fabric, no seams to match. Let me lay that down. I'm just double checking that I have all my same reds. Okay. Okay, I need to check the pattern. Let's see, this has the blue going downhill on top of the red. Okay, I'm going to finger press just part of that seam that I sewed, because we do have to match one thing here. Nope. Yes. That center blue seam does match, but that's the only thing you have to match on this big block. Okay, and there is another block for the nebula quilt. I really like these. They come together uh, in a fun, interesting manner, and they're nice and big. So, you know, the quadrant was 9 inches, so 18-inch overall block will make a nice twin size quilt of valor. So, oh, Lori, how funny. She has two seam rippers, Jack and Jill. That's very cute. Yes, Lori, I am using batiks in this quilt. So I have kind of just watercolor kind of print there. And then this one has more of a fern looking defined pattern on it. So two different blue batiks in that block. I'll put better pictures online one of these days. I need to get back into blogging. I like tracking and describing my projects on my blog, and I haven't done that the last few years. This silly day job is getting in the way. So 2 blocks done out of 12 for the Nebula Quilt of Valor from 3 Yard Fabric Cafe, one of their 3-yard patterns. And I'm going to say goodnight. It was so nice having all of you spend time with me here tonight. I will not be able to go live next week because it is Christmas Eve and we have a family event. I have to work in the morning, and then we all get together for dinner and festivities to kick off the holidays. So I hope everyone has a wonderful time. I am going to get the last few blocks of the Holidaze Sampler out. So be on the lookout, and I will do tutorial videos for all of those. And I just hope you guys have a wonderful holiday season. Stay warm if you're up in the snow. Stay cool if you're out somewhere where it's hot and dry. And we will be back together very soon. Take care.